Hey everyone, welcome again to Elevate.Strategy Leadership Live Unplugged and Fireside Chat. And this is the second time this week that you've seen me this week. So hopefully you're not tired of me, but actually you're not here for me, right? You're here for the guests that I have in store for you. So very plentiful happy today for our guest today. And I'll introduce him in a second, but yeah, hopefully you guys have had a good week. It's been pretty crazy for myself and for Elevate. I had a board member kind of sign up, and she's really excited to kind of get on boards now. But the problem that we're facing right now is with the COVID situation. It's very difficult, even with the board candidate. So, and most places that I found that are looking for senior leaders don't really prefer the Zoom approach. So in any case, but it's been a lot of fun. It's been a great week for our business. I had posted earlier this week around moderating for a partner of mine called Blue Steps, bluesteps.com. And I'd really highly recommend that you check them out if you have the opportunity. They're www.bluesteps.com. And they're a very high profile partner of mine that we partnered together for career coaching and executive career management, etc. So it's bluesteps.com. I'm actually going to have the president of the organization that Blue Steps is part of on my show in a couple of weeks. So I'm looking forward to that. But without further ado, I want to introduce our guest today. And my relationship with this guest is very interesting. So my guest today is Randy Dewey. And he's almost like, when I first met him and got to know what he did, I realized that he's sort of like a jack of all trades, and I think quite a master of a number of them. And I couldn't really keep track of what he was doing, but I just knew that he was a pretty big wig. But the role that he was playing at Bailey Technologies, which some of you might have heard of, was president and CEO. So obviously he was very senior and very up there. But actually I met him because my daughter and his daughter went to the same ballet school. And so we got onto talking, and he actually introduced me to Blue Steps, who now is my partner. And that's how I joined them. So it's kind of a full circle thing. It's really great to see him. Now, I've never really spoken to him in person, or at least about his personal journey story. So I'm hearing it for the first time as you are. If you are here live today, please drop a comment below where you are. It'd be great to see what our reach is today. Earlier this week, the interview with Leona McCharles was great. Had a lot of great reception. So, all right, without further ado, here's a bit about Randy. So Randy Dewey is now the global CEO. He's a global CEO who has had success delivering rapid growth for companies from a wide range of sectors. Over his 30-plus year career, he has built 10 separate companies as CEO or a C-suite role, and has held board positions in 13 companies. Randy is also an influential executive coach. And in 2021, this year, Randy founded Lift Leadership, using his coaching methodology, which he developed to help companies through challenging times and assist with the path to growth and scale. He recently published a book entitled When the Unthinkable Happens, How to Lead Your Team and Pivot Your Business for Growth and Opportunity. And the book is now published, and it's going to be ramping up for publicity pretty soon. So without further ado, I'm going to bring him up front stage. Randy, good to have you on my show. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Simeon.
It's great to see you. And if there's a bit of a glitch in connection issues, all right, no problem. Okay, so Randy, great to have you on the show. And I was just saying that we've crossed paths sort of serendipitously, and you've
Mhm.
actually been very vital in the growth of Elevate, my own company as well. So I really thank you for that. Um, Randy, for those of you who don't know you, and I suspect that you've got some fans that are watching, but others who don't know you, can you explain a little about what you do today with Lift Leadership, and maybe just what is Lift Leadership as far as the services that you provide?
Sure. Thank you again for having me on. So LIFT is an acronym for Lead, Inspire, Focus, and Transform. And I founded LIFT Leadership really around, after 10 company turnarounds over 3 decades. There was a number of different sort of very common threads about my approach and what was working, what wasn't working, and how to actually take a company that was either in some difficulty, whether it was financial, operational, sales related, how to then pivot that business onto a pathway of growth and scale. And so I decided to write it in, take it down and put it into a book. So for me, it was a fantastic process because I really was able to crystallize in those 15 chapters all that had happened through the course of my career, and the highs and the lows, and try and build stories around each one of the chapters from real world experiences. And as well, I took a
Hmm.
historical story about the fall of Constantinople and kind of how that sort of related. So I tried to turn it, take a business book of 450 pages and make it an interesting read, not just a dry business book. So, anyways, it was a big journey for me, and took me a couple of years
Yeah.
to really put it down. And yeah, I was excited to see it go out to the world now.
So when you work with, are your clients primarily individual CEO and C-suite boards, or are they sort of a company business to business kind of a model?
Certainly business to business type of model. Like I will deal with the C suite, the COOs, CEOs, that are really, find themselves in a difficult spot, whether it's the company's hit a plateau and they're unable to grow, or they've got issues related to the pandemic and they got hangover with their cost structure, and they're having trouble getting profitable growth. And really, my roots are in strategy and helping companies really find a way towards pivoting into one, profitable growth, and is get themselves through to the other side. So there's a company's going to be facing some sort of a challenge if they're calling me, that's for sure.
Gotcha. And is there any particular industry that you focus in, or is it sort of more broadly speaking, strategy?
Well, if I look at the one common thread through 9 different sectors that I operate in, the most common thread is manufacturing. There's some aspect to operations within the company.
Gotcha.
I've been in financial services, but I would say that that the heart of it has been certainly a manufacturing and operational base for sure.
Right. And when folks hire you in to help counsel or guide them, is there a pattern as far as like competency, people in the team not being complete around that? Is it a people issue? Is it a process, technology? The typical kind of a framework. What do you encounter the most as far as, you said, operational piece? But is it talent, or is it process? Is it technology?
I would say process and control is usually at the heart of the problem. And then typically people, as they start to lose, somewhat faith in the vision, or they're unclear about the vision, there oftentimes needs to be a bit of a reset. One, reset on the vision of the company, where we're going to take the company. Then what are some of those obstacles and barriers that are actually holding the company back? And it's going to fall into one of the categories. It's either a sales issue, it's an operational issue, it's a balance sheet slash finance issue, but we've
Hmm.
got to fix those issues. But they're typically symptomatic of deeper problems in that need to be sorted out in the organization. But always, as every company is, it's a collection of people and
Right.
culture, and you're always going to have challenges in that framework if the company and the business aren't doing well, because people, it's very stressful when you're in a company that's
Yeah.
not quite doing well, or there's been cuts, or there's been issues that are related to the symptomatic problem. But so yes, so people are always going to be at the heart of it, but they are usually it's a natural reaction to the circumstances by which they face. How do you
Right.
then get into fixing those? Then you can help get the culture back repaired. So there's a process there and a methodology, and it really does require you to go back down foundationally to build back up the vision, find out what's blocking the company
Right.
from achieving their pathway to growth, and what is it within their market that needs to be fixed or corrected. So it's always a
Mhm.
fishbone there. There's a multifaceted issue, but there's always many tentacles to it, no doubt.
So the acronym LIFT, where did that come from, and why are those words significant and meaningful to you?
Yeah, well, in the course of writing the book, as I started to look at all the different themes, leading with passion, and leadership in a company is really starts at the top of the company, and
Mhm.
that leader needs to be passionate about one, what the business is there for, what the business is going to do, what we are trying to achieve as an organization. But there needs to be an element of passion coming out of the C-suite for the business
Right.
in order for that to become somewhat infectious in the whole organization. So if there's a lack of passion, or there's a bit of a wandering away from what was causing passion in the earlier days, how do we restore that? How do we get back to removing those barriers or those things that are causing a problem within leadership to really be passionate about their business? But then
Mhm.
of course the I is inspiring your people. How do you then, now that you're sort of reinvigorated and you're passionate about the new vision or the new direction or the new and finances that have come into the company to help recharge the balance sheet, how do you then get that vision really translated down into the people? Because there's going to be cultural issues, as we talked about earlier, but you have to inspire your people, or else you won't
Right.
have everybody working, all the oars won't be in the water, everybody won't be pushing in the same direction. So you have to inspire your people. And then the F
Right.
is about focusing on what makes lasting change. And oftentimes, we've seen business that gets so distracted by, the exciting new shiny thing over there, and then everybody's start, moving from here to there to the other. But you have to have a very focused determination, and you have to focus on what's going to make lasting change, and
Right.
make sure we're not, we're looking past the veneer of things and actually getting to the heart and the root of things that need to be fixed. So focusing on what makes lasting change. And then the last is T, is transforming obstacles into opportunities. So
Yeah.
whatever that obstacle is, it doesn't have to be a full-fledged crisis like a pandemic, but whatever it
Mhm.
is that's holding the organization back, sales, operations, finance, whatever that is, what is that obstacle? Let's use that to transform the company. Now, it's not just about survival though, but within every obstacle, there's always something in there that will help you pivot to an opportunity. And what is that? Like, we're not just here to survive, but we're here to grow and thrive. So how do you find
Mhm.
the silver lining in the situation that will help you pivot the business actually into a direction of growth and opportunity? So that's really where the acronym LIFT came. That's really where the book When the Unthinkable Happens comes from, is really at the heart of what I've done over my 30 years.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah. When I think about, the way that you lay it out to LIFT, it's sometimes it reminds me a little bit of sometimes working with clients on an individual basis, sort of a similar thing, right? It's the approach of the leadership inspiration and the focus, and then the transformation for them to take maybe some struggles or things that they failed in the past, or failed in as the world will see it, and look at the silver lining, look for the opportunity to pivot into something that's positive, right? And
Yeah.
I guess if you scale that up to like 10 or 15 people on a C board or a board of directors, you're going to have like this mechanism of a machine called a business,
Hmm.
which thinks the same way, right? So that's great.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Randy, let me switch gears a little bit now and start maybe talking about your progression of your career. When I look at your LinkedIn profile, and when I've spoken to you the couple of times that I have, I'm often confused about what you're doing because you're doing so much, right?
Hmm.
And tell me about, sort of, as far back as you like to go, how things got started, some things that came along the way that you tried, different things and didn't work out, or it kind of led to things. What was the journey like for you, from when you started the journey all the way to where you are today?
Sure, sure. So I'll go back slightly, back, 40 plus years, and back to
Yeah.
when I was, I was a first generation Canadian, particularly talking about my mother's side, which was
Yeah.
probably the most influential in my journey. But, there was some folks that packed up and from a country that they and moved to Canada in a language they didn't know, and made a life here. And I was really formed, I would say, in sort of fashion to that hard work was absolutely at the core of it. But this is the land of opportunity, and what are you going to do with the platform by which, we
Right.
sacrificed everything to kind of bring you to be in. And I really, I took that so to heart, and I knew that, hard work, nothing was going to be handed to me, but I had to go out and make my own luck. And if I worked hard and figured out my path, that those things would open up. So early on in my career, I just had this really go get it kind of mentality. And all. I went to school. I got my, I took the first co-op job that was farthest from the town I was raised in because it was too small. I felt I wanted to go to the bigger cities. And anyways, I went off to a smaller town, but it was a really great opportunity. And I really just, worked very hard. And I remember one really influential moment that happened. And in fact, I talk about it in my book because it was so important to me. But I was walking home one day and I came out of the factory and I walked beside the president, and we were walking home in the same direction. And I had this conversation with him, trying to think of all the best business questions my I could come up with. And he gave me these just really great sort of answers. And as we walked along the way, there wasn't anything like stunning about what he told me, but at the end of the walk, when we were naturally going our own ways, he turned to me and said, "You know what? You can be anything you want to be. You just have to put your mind to it." And I tell you, that just really impressed a young 22-year-old kid.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like, you know what, you're not smarter than me. You're just more experienced. I just have to go out and get the smarts and the experience. I can
Right.
be a president too. And it was at that day that I said, I'm going to be a CEO. And there was nothing standing in my way but myself. And I just sat back and I figured out, okay, I'm going to be a CEO. How fast can I get there? What do I need to do? What's education that I require? What experiences do I require? And I was an environmental coordinator in that factory, getting lagoon samples and bringing it to the lab. And here I was determining I was going to be a CEO one day, and I set a 10-year goal. And I became a president after 8 years. And it was really just sheer determination. I worked my way up through the ranks, went from
Hmm.
environmental into human resources, into operations, into sales and marketing, into finance, and then into the C-suite and into the CEO slot. And it was just sheer determination. But you know what, for me, it worked. And what my grandfather did to bring us to this country, and the platform he gave me about just work hard, Randy, and make your way, and you will figure out your path. And he was
Right.
absolutely right. Absolutely right.
What was it about the CEO roles specifically that really drew you towards it? Right. The gentleman that you're walking with, and you said, you had admiration for what he was doing, but what did it stoke inside of you that said, that's what I want to become? Because you could have been any other leader, right? Any kind of leader. That thing that comment about anything you put your mind to, you can do, could have applied to being like an
Yeah.
athlete, right? But
Yeah.
what is it about
Yeah.
CEO?
It was about leading lots of people and being responsible to help a company and creating an environment for everybody to thrive in. And we've all seen, we all had examples in those early days when you looked at companies or you looked at very call it cruel sort of leaders, and you realize that I really just wanted to have the opportunity to create an environment for everybody to thrive within. And so it wasn't just about having control and power at the top. It was really more about having the ability to actually create an environment for the entire family of the company to actually thrive together. And what could I actually create if I was at the top of the house, to create a house that actually allowed everybody to really grow and work well together? And then I
Mhm.
became a real admirer of Google and some of those other companies that created these environments where everybody really thrived. And so it was that sort of desire to be at the top, that I could create the environment that I would want to work in, and that I would expect and would hope that others would thrive within. And what would that produce? And 10 turnarounds and all those, I've traveled 1 million miles, worked in 32 countries and in 9 different sectors of business. And I have to tell you, it actually works. And I absolutely appreciated the chance to be at the top of the house.
Do you remember the first exhilarating experience that you had? And there's like confirmation that, hey, this is really what it's about. Was it your first turnaround? Remember that
Yes.
first?
Yeah. So I worked in a company in the United States. I had moved down there, and it was interesting. I took the job knowing the company was actually about to file Chapter 11, and they told me they were really upfront. They absolutely, there was no, they weren't, sort of hiding the realities. But they really needed this contract negotiated, and I was the only guy they felt that could do it from the people that they were interviewing. But they were very, very forthright. Said, look, we're going to file Chapter 11 because we just cannot sustain this situation, and we need to redo our balance sheet. And we think we're going to emerge, but there's a lot of risk with the job. But it starts with this contract negotiation because they had a pretty tough union at the time. This is early mid '90s, and I said, you know what, I absolutely, I'll take the risk, and just give me a ticket home if I have to return to Canada, and if it doesn't quite work out. Anyways, I got there, got the contract negotiated, but in the process of that, we had to prepare the bankruptcy emergence plan and get the dip financing, which ended up being, I think, about 90 million bucks to restructure the whole company. Anyways,
Mhm.
all think, within about 3 weeks after the company filed bankruptcy, the first resignation around the board table came, and then the next one, and then the next one, until I was the only guy left from the original team. Within about 4 or 5 weeks, everybody had left except myself, and I was at that time the HR guy. Anyways, for me,
Wow.
this is my opportunity. The Blackstone and flew in, and there was a lot of panic around the table about where did all these people go and what's going on. And anyways, they just turned to me and just said, the plan. You're going to help us with all the restructuring anyway, so just keep busy and keep the tires on. And I just took this as a great opportunity. It was a little unnerving because I didn't have many people around me anymore, but I just got busy with the plan. I just took the liberty to do what I needed to do, and until someone told me otherwise, I was just going to get in there and do everything in operations and finance and quality and in customer service, everything, all that the plan had called for, because time was of the essence. Like, you could only be in Chapter
Right.
11 for so long before you either start losing contracts or start having bank issues. Anyhow,
Right.
anyways, they ended up replacing everybody around the table except the president's role. I was the de facto president, and that became my road in the first sort of, I'll call it, turnaround that really proved to be just one of the most exciting and exhilarating experiences. We ended up selling the company not that many months after we emerged, and the company went on to do great things. And that began a journey with me in private equity of going around helping companies. So that was a real exhilarating moment, but it was high stakes game at the moment for sure.
Right. What we'll go back to sort of the progression, but what do you think it is about your personality or your skill set that enabled you to do something like that? Right? It's a real gutsy move. You never had the experience doing that before. You knew that you were signing up for something risky, but to go from risky to being the president is a big step, right? So, where did you get the knowledge from to know what to do at every step of the way to to turn this around, to replace people, to kind of know, did you read a lot of books, or are you an intuitive person, or how do you work? What is it about
Well,
your?
I think partially, I was making my way through all of the different levels of management, and moving through it. And when I ended up in that position, like, there's just no way I could convince somebody I was an expert in finance, or I was an expert in this, or so I had no choice but to call upon the expertise, be brutally
Mm,
honest with my own limitations, and then make sure that I surrounded myself with good practitioners in those disciplines. I had a pretty keen nose. I knew where to go, what things were wrong. Didn't necessarily know how to fix them, but I knew who could fix them. And so it was
mhm,
really in emboldening people to help me with the cause, to say, hey, look, if that needs to be restructured. I remember particularly customer service was a real issue. We were getting major customer returns, and it was causing a huge drain on the balance sheet and some of the forward liabilities that we were carrying. And I'm like, I don't know how to fix customer service. I never worked in customer service before, but I knew a guy that was extremely good in customer service, but was,
mhm.
not necessarily given the reins to do what he needed to do to fix things. I just unblocked all of those things, give him the role and responsibility and charge to get that done.
Right.
And moving through organizations with purpose and empowering the people that, even though they don't have the title, but they have the capability, just
Right.
remove the stigma to that and give them the responsibility and say, go get that done for us. We need you to do that, and here's the time and the constraints, and let the organization go with it. So you've got to, of course, get the strategy right at the beginning. Make sure everybody knows the end goal. Yeah, of course, you're going
Right.
to take 10 turns. The strategy can never figure all of it out at the beginning, but you can have a general course. We had a
Right.
general course, and being open and making sure that you surrounded yourself with great people in the respective disciplines would just help you get those things that you're facing accomplished along the way.
Right. So you were resourceful. You were strategically resourceful and finding the right people at the right time.
Yeah.
And I think that's the mark of a great advisor, right? Is to say, to know and to tell a leader, no, you can't do this. And so you have to say no, but yes to someone else. And I think what part of what you're saying also is just the people who had the capability but didn't have the stick,
Hmm.
moving that barrier so they can do their thing. It's also instilling confidence, right? It's also giving them the sense that, hey, you can do this, and I trust you by giving you the, not the stick, but the carrot, right? To be able to kind of lead the charge and to solve the problem, right?
Right, right, absolutely. And everybody loves the opportunity, right? When someone hands in the bat and say, here's what we need you to do, and you remove the barriers. People, it's a lot of people will just step up to the occasion, and knowing that they've got a shot to really make a difference, can really, ignite some real passion within the organization. And oftentimes too, like everybody around that person knows that person's the right person, typically to
Right.
do that. And so you do so many different things in just that one move. One, you give that person an enormous amount of excitement because
Mhm.
now they have the chance. They finally, all they're done complaining about it. Now they actually have the opportunity to do it. But then everybody around them will start to really support them because they want them to win. They want them to make the changes that they've all been worried about or concerned about. And here now have the chance to do it. So what you find is that the one appointment ends up causing a cascading effect of support under that person to actually affect the change. And it's incredible
Mhm.
the amount that you can move with one sort of positional change like that.
Right. Gotcha. So just to rewind back to the experience where you had that role, walking kind of home with the CEO next to you and him sort of giving you that advice, right?
Yes.
What did you do then after that? Like, what was the next move that you made?
Well, so after that, it became, okay, what education, what experience,
Mhm.
what do I need to do to put the pieces on the in place so that I can actually move to that level. I recognized that I needed I had an environmental technology degree, a diploma from college, and okay, well, I need a business degree. I need to understand finance. If I'm going to run a company, how can you not understand finance? So I went back
Right.
for a bachelor's in business, and then I went back for a master's in business, and I did this all along the time at the same time working in parallel with my job because I had a family at that time. So I was, I didn't have the luxury of just going back to school full time. So I
Yeah.
had to,
Yeah.
earn it along the way. But then, just learning from great people, and I had every tape, everything from Tony Robbins to, Jack Canfield, and all these people in those days, Maxwell.
Yeah.
Like I just read everything I could, aspired, and in fact, even when I started my business degree, I wasn't like determined. I was determined to learn. I wasn't necessarily all tied up. Well, I got to have the piece of paper. No, no, it
Mhm.
was about learning and understanding that, so that when I was in that position, I had it. I didn't need a piece of paper to show you that I knew it. I really
Right.
wanted to just understand it. Ultimately, finish the 2 degrees anyways, but it was really the purpose of making sure that I had the skills in my mind and in my capability to actually do those jobs really well. And so there was a thread of that. The other thing too, which I think was really important, that lesson of asking that president at that moment was very, it just taught me that if you wanted to be somebody, well, go talk to somebody that's already there and ask them how to get there.
Right.
So not 2 or 3 years, 2 years after that, I ended up, I was in British Columbia at the time, and I was working there, and the CEO came through, and she was just, a great lady. And at the end of her speech in our factory, in our facility, she said, if anybody has a question, I have an open door policy. And oddly, the next week I was going to Vancouver to the head office for a meeting. And so I thought to myself, you know what? If I want to know how to be a president, go talk to one and go ask the question.
Yeah.
So,
Take her
anyways,
up on the offer. Yeah.
she made the offer. I took the door. So, anyways, I booked a 5-minute appointment, and everybody, I got back to my boss in my factory, and I got immediately. I said, "Oh, yeah, I'm just going to ask her questions." She said she has an open door policy. It's not about you. It's just a personal question.
Yeah.
Anyways, next week I stood outside the door at 8 o'clock, and I went in there, didn't sit down because I only had 5 minutes, and I said, "I have one question." I said, "I want your job, not today, but in 10 years. How do I get your job?" And it was funny
Right.
because she just paced around the office, then turned and went to the call box in her office and said to her secretary, "Clear my morning." And then sat down with me for the next almost about 3 hours and just
Wow.
poured into this young guy with a bunch of excitement about what he wanted to be, and just gave me this incredible lesson. And it was a lesson of, the about going to get my dreams, but also just filling in the education and the experience, and be open and willing to do whatever it took to get to make the company successful, and that the hands of those around you will actually lift you to that role, and that you
Mhm.
don't actually have to get the role. The role will naturally come to you because of the how you've invested in the people around you, and their hands will lift you into the role. And I had to say that was a really powerful sort of principle. And
Right.
and I was already kind of wired about people, and that, and as I mentioned earlier, some of the things that happened in that other role, but that was really just cemented it. She said, I never wanted to become a president. The people wanted me to be the president, and I just became a natural fit, and it just was, it naturally worked. But it was them that brought me to this role, not me fighting to get the role. And that was a very influential talk for me that day. So yeah, that was another one.
What's interesting is uh, I noticed that the best leaders are usually the ones who start off quite reluctant to be leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And, those who are aggressively trying to get leadership experience, not experience, but just sort of really trying to achieve, the highest goals, and, will often do things that are quite desperate, right, to get to that position. And I think that's kind of what, in the end of the day, sort of is their Achilles heel, is that, when you're passive about when you're reluctant to be a leader, you're exhibiting sort of usually sort of just good traits, hardworking traits. You're there to get the job done, you're faithful to it, and you do it, and people appreciate that reliability, that faithfulness, and say, hey, we need a president, we need a leader who's like that, right? Who kind of leads with integrity, leads caring about people, and not just it's all about me, right? So and being a leadership is not easy, right? You've got a bullseye on your back at every point, right? It's always going to be back to, okay, well, leadership, it's he's not doing a good job. And I think people miss that point, is that a lot of times leadership can be quite suffering, quite putting yourself in the shoes of someone who just can't. The buck stops with you, right? So when
Mm-hmm.
when everyone else is asleep, you may not be asleep because your head's whirling, right? Um,
Yes.
So tell me about, how did you, as you were learning these things, acquiring, what was some of the most difficult elements of leadership for you to stomach? It just didn't really jive with your personality, and you had to really work at that.
Well, that's an interesting question. It is true that there's an element of needing thick skin when you're in leadership, because there are always going to be, armchair quarterbacks, as they say, that have very lots of criticism. But I try not to focus on that, and not to give any really mind space to that, because there's really no good end, and the proof's in the pudding. Like, if we're gonna make this right, the results are really is what's going to quiet
Right.
the naysayers.
Right.
And so I've always just sort of focused on it, and I had lots of, certainly, as every CEO has had, I've had lots of critics from the crowd, but those critics usually quieted down as the performance emerged. And really, it's just staying true to your own resolve and your own
Mhm.
integrity, and making sure that the values and the vision of the company are rock solid, and that you continue to operate within it. And you'll always have those people. They never really ever truly go away. One or two may leave or something like, but there's going to be two or three other ones come right around the corner. So you can't let that let that hold you down. And there's, what was that, Albert Einstein? He had this great quote. Actually, I have it on my computer, on my wallpaper. Actually, it is, "I am not afraid of storms, for I am learning how to sail my ship. Tough times will never last, but tough people do." And
Oh,
I
okay.
I just love that quote, because you know what?
Wow.
The storms of life, the storms of business, they'll come and they go. But I'm not going to let that define me. But my ship is going to continue to sail, and I am going to be committed to getting that ship through that storm. And there's always going to be waves, and those waves may be the words of others, they may be the naysayers in the crowd. But I'm not going to let that storm and that wave define the purpose here. The purpose is to get that ship through that storm and get all of the masses of people that are on that boat with you through to the other side. And ultimately, tough times never last, but tough people do. And it's having a tough mindset that we can get through this, and the collective will of the whole organization wants to get through with it. So you've got everybody, even the quiet people that don't necessarily always jump up and tell you that they're right there with you. They're right there with you anyway. So you just
Yeah.
have to continue to recognize that they're there, even though they don't say it. And ultimately, you'll find out how much of a difference you've made in those people's minds and hearts. Because after
Mhm.
the sun shines and things are a lot better, all of a sudden you hear the rumblings of those stories of how much of a difference the things made in their life as a result of what
Right.
you did in the middle of the storm. So it's being tough minded through those things and being resilient.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. And so when I go back to, you're sitting in the office, your boss, I guess at that point, clears the calendar, sits down with you, gives you that lesson in life, and then what? What did you do with that? What was the next step for you?
Yeah, well, that was the precursor to this earlier story I told, where I ended up in that company in the U.S. that was in the
Okay.
at the point of filing Chapter 11. So
Right.
what happened there, and there became, within whatever 2 years of that conversation with that lady, I was in the presidential slot by de facto, right? And then that began a very long run of me going through with this private equity firm to help them with some of their troubled assets and some of their difficult portfolio companies, and moving around. So I moved
Right.
around over, United States and Canada, going through and helping companies that were in tough positions. And not all of them were Chapter 11. Like, some of them were just, they just had a strategy, or their market was commoditizing, and they were struggling, and then they were trying to find ways to pivot out of it. Or sometimes there was business investments that they had made that weren't working out, and they needed to get the business through to the other side. So it was just getting into those tough challenges, and helping steer the company to a better place, and helping unlock the value that was really trapped in there for the owners.
Right. Were you part of a company at that point, or were you independent?
I floated between the two. Like, in some of those earlier years, I was an employee, and then ended up, moving into a consulting sort of position at a company called the Navistone Group, and I was doing that for years under that banner. But it was kind of the same work, like I was, whether I went in as a consultant, I
Yeah.
was sitting in the main chair as the CEO, and helping navigate the company through the tumult, and getting them through to the other side, and helping the company really unlock their value. So yeah, so I kind of moved between employee slash consultant in those days.
Right. When you said 9 sectors, right? That's kind of
Yeah.
9 in different industries, okay, and 32 countries. Um, I presume that well, I know from different in sectors, having been in consulting, that they're very different, right? The leadership style is different, the expectations from the market are different, and then you add to that the 32 geographies globally, right? What is it that you do to gain trust? Like, why do people, getting there is, I always say that to my clients, it's easy to get that first coffee chat, right? Like, I know
Mhm.
somebody who's somebody, but
Yeah.
it's very difficult to get past the second point, which is the decision makers, right? People who will look at you and say, am I going to entrust this problem into your hands? How do you earn trust?
Well, certainly my reputation has, and my word of mouth, I've never really put out a resume for, I can't even remember how long. So I was
Hmm.
usually passed along to folks to, when they ran into situations. So, but
Right.
once you get into the coffee, the thing that I want to mention though is that, like, the principles of leadership, the principles of strategy, don't change. So the fundamental principles of business don't change. But yes, of course, the sector changes, the nuances, the realities of one market over another, or
Right.
how one technology works versus another. Um, those sort of practical things do
Right.
change by industry. But if I go back to what I did at the beginning, where I'm never going to say I'm the smartest guy in the room for that, for everything in here, but let's bring the smartest people in the room so that that are disciplined in those areas that we really need to understand well, and then let's continue to let our methodology and our process drive, and then make sure that the subject matter experts are brought into the room and recognize when we need to clear certain hurdles, and who the team is always going to be multidisciplinary. You're always going to have multiple players on the team. Then you're going to
Right.
have resources come in and resources go out when you're accomplishing something significant or Herculean in some cases. But don't assume you're the expert. Make sure you bring in the expertise. So it doesn't really matter what sector I go in. I will apply that methodology, and that methodology is proven to work.
Right. Gotcha. Um, let's switch a little bit to the question about struggles and about sort of forks in the road, decisions that were made that weren't, the best, and sort of what you did to get through them. Can you share with us maybe one or two examples of where you made decisions that maybe you look back on and say, that wasn't the right one, and how did you get through those situations to make sure that you land on the other side?
Sure. So, nobody bats 1,000 in business, that's for sure. And we all have had our, situations. I remember one time I ran a factory in Brampton, Ontario. We were, that was a really difficult, environment, because the company had been around for over 100 years. There was this sort of, we've always been here, we always will be here. And it was really challenging, because this company was really basically insolvent right from the first day I walked in,
Right.
and trying to get the organization to really truly understand the depth of the significance of the problem was no small feat. And I would say in the first, I would say the first at least 4 to 6 months, it was hard to get through and break through the mentality, and it really, I certainly made some mistakes. There's no doubt, and I really upset, some of the union leadership, and some of the people that really had influence over it. But really, when I sat back and actually humbly went back and said, you know what, I think I got that wrong. Let's turn the page. Let's have a fresh
Hmm.
start here. Here's what I really am. What's bothering me? Here's my intentions were pure and right, but my method was probably not. So let's sort of reset it. And it's kind of like trying to, eat a little bit of crow, and be as humble as you can, and come back and say, okay, you know what, we got off on the wrong foot. I did, these three things, and they were kind of a little bit of a bonehead move, but what it is what it is. So, but I apologize for whatever that caused.
Yeah.
Let's sort
Yeah.
of reset the deck here, and that sort of humble approach is needed, because if leadership just doesn't admit when they've failed,
Hmm.
everybody knows it. And then if the leader doesn't admit it and go back and try and right the road, then everybody feels like, they're living in a bit of a lie, because if they're not going to ever admit that they've made a mistake here, either they're too arrogant to admit it, or they're so naive they don't even understand it, and neither is good. So you've got to come more straight down the fairway and actually get it out on the table, and right the ship.
Right. Gotcha. I think that's one of the the characteristics of strong leaders is being able to identify it, look ahead of time, and say, you know what, that's going to be a mistake, and I have an intuition that I made a decision already, and I'm sort of two steps ahead of myself, and I can kind of see what's coming, right? And at that point, it's like, okay, well, I need to do something about that. And the humble approach certainly is for. I think being Canadian also helps, right? We're the
Maybe.
nice people by default. But yeah, if your intention is good, I think people understand that, right? They see what it is that you're trying to do, and as you say, people are generally speaking supportive, and I think that even if they have something against you, generally speaking, they're forgiving as well. So because everyone's going to move on, everyone understands that people make mistakes.
Yeah.
Um,
So you asked
a
me for
lot.
two. You asked me for two, and I gave you one. So let me give you a second one.
Okay.
So, I've done a lot of acquisitions over the years, and I've raised a lot of money, lots of debt, lots of equity, consummated a lot of transactions. However, the one thing that I would say in the early days of my acquisitions, there was a degree of, I would say there's almost a little bit too much trust that I would put on the other side of the table.
Okay.
And then I think, I can't remember which auditor, I think it was KPMG, said to me, you know what, Randy, it's trust and verify. Trust and verify. And as I got a little more mature in some of those nuances within these transactions,
Right.
trust and verify was essential. And it wasn't always that the person was being dishonest on the other side of the table. It's that they didn't necessarily, we oftentimes make improper assumptions that they understand the actual nature of the question, or we expect that they understand the situation more than they actually or less than they actually do. And so they answer the question from, most of the time from their most honest side, but the verification will oftentimes come back that, you know what, they didn't even understand the actual nature of your question, or they made so many assumptions of their own when they answered your question that you can't
Right.
just assume, and you can't assume what their assumptions are. So you've got to verify and make sure that you get on the other side. Not a matter of distrust. It's a matter of making sure that you have the best information so you can make the wisest decision in the situation. And I would say that would probably be another sort of significant learning.
Right. Gotcha. What brings you down? Like what deflates you of energy completely? So you talked about sort of learning to work with people, right, and sort of making decisions that were poor and kind of work. But personally speaking, what is it that draws? Like you can't be 100% optimistic, and like you just can't be, or are you? I don't know, but what's
Oh,
one
no,
thing that really?
I would say, like a lot of people, you always need that support around you, right? If you start losing the support around you, or those above you, those are challenging times. Like, and when you're in the thick of challenges, and you're in the thick of difficult times, having support around you. If you lose the support around you, those are tough. Those are tough times, which is why I think, there is a role for executive coaching and consulting and advisory type of services, because it is lonely at the top, and we can
Yeah.
all face situations where, the interest of everybody isn't always aligned. And when you get a misalignment of interest, then, if it was lonely at the top, it gets even lonelier at the top when interests
Right.
get
Sure.
misaligned, or not necessarily misaligned, maybe it's not the right word, but just going in different directions. Then
Yeah.
that can really cause a fracture in the executive, psychologically, and it really goes to the heart of a challenging situation. And I certainly would fall victim to that, no doubt. When those alignments aren't there any longer.
So what do you do when you have that situation where you feel like you're not supported well enough? Like, do you exercise? So here's the context, right? Is a lot of my clients are very senior. Many of them have had C-suite experience, but the reality is that they may be in a rut right now where something has brought them down, even to the point of where they may be employed fully, and there's nothing wrong with their employment situation, but from a um, psychological or emotional something, it's that they realize that they haven't maybe lived up to their a little bit down. And then I often say to them, like, well, are you going for walks? Like, you've got to take care of yourself, right? So what do you do to kind of chime up? Do you listen to music? Do you like, as
Hmm.
as as Randy the
Well,
person, what do you do?
Yeah, so for me, the first and most important step is to be honest with yourself about the problem. Because if you don't fundamentally get to the core of what is the issue, then you're going to allow a lot of other things in your life to go on off on the rails. Whether it's you're not taking care of yourself, you're eating too much, you're drinking too much, whatever it is that is the outlets that start to surface when you have a core problem going on in your life. You can't let those ancillary things get out of control and create other problems for you. So you got to kind of get back and be honest with what the problem is.
Hmm.
In chapter 13 of my book, I talk about a personal manifesto. And it is a discipline I've had from that 22-year-old kid I talked about earlier to the 53-year-old guy sitting here with you today. Having that personal plan and writing down those things and starting to map out what I want the next years of my life to look like and the things that I want to accomplish, and how the situation that I've got in front of me that's dragging me down personally or professionally, whatever it is, that is identified. And then I put, again, like I have done many times, I put a plan against it. So I start to walk myself through and out of the circumstances. And sometimes nature, life, things just take care of themselves. But if I'm walking on a pathway, not allowing those other issues that for that spillover effect to happen, but make sure I
Hmm.
take care of those things. But just recognize what the problem is and put a plan around the problem. And you'll find
Hmm.
that some of those ancillary things start to dissipate. You'll start to get the excitement to exercise. You'll get the excitement to, do something else or take on another hobby that gets your mind off of the core issue or whatever it is. But you got to be honest with the root of the problem and then put a plan around the root of the problem. And you'll find over time that that thing will work itself out. If you don't purpose to get yourself out of there, then it won't happen. You're not a ship in the sea with no rudder. Get your rudder, put it in the water, get your book, get your planner, get and figure out exactly what it is that you need to do to help yourself through that funk that you're in, and it will work itself out if as long as you plan it out.
Yeah, I think baked into what you're saying though is that you have to be disciplined with following that plan as well, right? Because so many, it's like a New Year's resolution, right? You put down like 365 things that you're going to do, and like
Yeah.
by like fifth one, you've completely lost the rails, right? So I sense when I speak to you that there's an underlying discipline that needs to be there that says, I'm going to stay on track no matter what, and if you have a manifesto that's always going to be smooth sailing, right? There's a lot of assumptions that you have baked into there that's going to allow you to
Mhm.
make it to, through the year, right? So that's something that I would say as well, just in general, is um, a lot of executives actually lack a lot of discipline, and I think that that's a key area that people riding throughout their career on their natural skills, right? Their natural ability to do something. They've been gifted to do something. And then when the going gets tough and they're kind of tossed a little bit because their skills haven't equipped them to deal with like difficulty, that's when discipline kicks in. I think, one of the things that's surprising to me and is how many successful people have gotten so far. And yet when something happens, you're talking to them, it's like, well, it's like I'm back in college again and I haven't studied for my exam, right? And even
Yeah.
though I've gotten like A's in all of my quizzes, but now here's a major test. And
Mhm.
so yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that plan, that manifesto, is the first step for a lot of people who are in a difficult bind right now, to listen to your story, to say, if you are in a bind right now, to be honest with yourself and then to sort of figure a way out of the path itself. And I'm assuming that what you're saying is along the way is to make sure you surround yourself with supportive people and a supporting kind of structure to help you get through that, right? So
Right.
gotcha.
Yeah.
um
The one thing you said, though, it resonates for sure. And it is, the lack of discipline that can sometimes be found amongst executives. And it's true. And I think part of it is because we're driving discipline into an organization relentlessly all day, every day, all through the week and all through the year. And
mm,
there's this sort of when it comes to our own personal discipline, sometimes you're fatigued, or if you go through a very difficult challenge, or you're terminated, or something goes on in your life, then then kind of the rubber just comes off, and you lack discipline, and all of a sudden all these other things sort of swoosh
mm,
in. And I think what's important is, as you said, resolutions often get broken, and people make them and then they fall apart on them. It's progress, and every time I've written
mm,
a manifesto, and then I've fallen off the rails on my own manifesto. It's refresh that manifesto and keep going. And what you'll find over time is that as long as you keep pushing yourself to rewrite and redo and keep going at it, you're making incremental changes every time. Even yes, maybe you fall off, but you get back on your horse, you refresh those items, and then you go back at it again. And what you'll find over time and after many years, that all those, even though you never finished one of your manifestos in its entirety, but you incrementally change with every one of them. And
Right.
that progress is important. So I think it's the determination is that, what I would tell my kids, if you fall down, there's no shame in it. But staying down, there's shame in it. So get back up and let's just keep going here, because in the end, you'll make a difference, and you'll find your path, and you'll work yourself through it.
Yeah. One of there's a famous speech called "The Man in the Arena" by Theodore
Mm,
Roosevelt. I don't know if you've heard
yeah,
that,
yeah.
but that's in recent years made me think of that, because when I left corporate to go into executive coaching, it was a move where I really didn't know what I was doing. I knew what I didn't want to do, but I knew what I wanted to do, but not quite sure. And there was a lot of naysayers, right? People who really come along, especially if you're making a move like that, and people can't envision you in any other role except what you've been doing. And so, and it's easy to be an armchair quarterback, like we talked about earlier. But it's really the person who's in the arena who's really doing the fighting and falling down and getting back up again with battle scars. And that's in a sense a bit of a nobility, right? In that you're not afraid to try, and knowing that you're going to make mistakes, but it's getting back up. It's that person is the one who is victorious in the end, right? So something like the one who sits back neither knows defeat nor winning. Neither
Mhm.
knows it means to be defeated and to win. So I do appreciate that. Randy, I have so we're coming to the top of the hour, but I have one question for you that's very important that I've been thinking about is why did you switch from your corporate executive job into executive leadership role? What was the impetus for drive for that?
Well, I really like working with companies. And if you look over the
Mhm.
course of my career, I just said 10 companies, 30 years. If you did the math, there's, 3 years is kind of the average in there. And I like to walk into difficult challenges and really help navigate companies through to the other side. And I've done it from within the slot, like within the position of CEO. But to have the chance to affect and influence more companies by helping and influencing CEOs and helping them through their challenges, I just feel that this chapter of my life is kind of an exciting one, because I can
Mhm.
do more with many, and make an even stronger impact. In writing the book and defining the methodology and letting others get the value of my 30 years of experience, I think it's a fun chapter of my life. I'm excited about what's in store. We'll see where the road takes me, but I've never really worried about it. I've always put my plans in place, and I found my path. So here I'm on an interesting journey, and I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I can't wait to read your book. I know you said it's in soft launch mode right now, but when is it coming out now in the public? Did you say is it in the new year, coming out pretty
No,
soon?
no, in a week and a half. So
Okay.
November 7th will be the full release. I did the audiobook myself, which I found kind of fun. I never really
Oh,
read a whole book myself, but
okay.
I was getting right into it. I mean, I was trying not to go off script, but I read the whole book and did the audiobook myself, which was kind of fun because there's so many personal stories in there. It was kind of like it was really exciting to do. But yeah, the hardcover, the soft cover, the audiobook, and the ebook, all of that is going to be available on November 7th. It is in soft launch right now, as a bunch of book critics are working on the book to see what acclamations that I can achieve. So, anyways, yeah, it's a interesting time. It's a big personal project. Hadn't had it on the life list, and anyways, I was able to accomplish it. But yes, it's coming on Amazon. It'll be widely available very soon.
Gotcha. Great. Well, Randy, I have now just a series of rapid fire questions that I always ask my guests. Just two or three of them. You never heard. You don't know what I'm going to ask you. So these are not
Okay.
part of the five. And just top of your mind. And what do you think? Okay. So first question is, what is your alter ego profession? If you weren't doing what you were doing right now, what would you be doing?
Oh, an NHL hockey player for sure. I'd be,
Okay.
challenging Ovechkin for Gretzky's title.
Okay. Do you play now?
No, I kind of gave up that dream many many years ago. But
Okay.
I was born into a sports family. My grandfather was a professional soccer player in Holland back in the day, so I came in with that sort of expectations to some degree, and I really drove towards it in the younger days. But anyways, yeah, that was a dream, but I'm not sure I'll get that
Gotcha.
one.
Gotcha. Well, it's never too late. There's a seniors league, I'm sure.
Oh,
Um,
sure.
so Randy, what is one word that you love?
Integrity.
Integrity.
Just keeping true to myself, keeping true to my principles,
Mhm.
making sure that I'm not a preacher and out there preaching them, but let my life and my walk match my what I desire. And when I get it wrong, and when I'm not true to that, that I make sure those roads are fixed
Right. Gotcha.
as best I
And
can.
what is one word that you hate?
Failure. You know, I don't it's not that I hate the word failure, but I don't just view failure as actually failure. I think it's like learning in motion, like if something doesn't go right, okay, what do I learn from it? How do I take the lessons out of it? Because I'm being shaped, I'm being formed. Like Albert Einstein said, I'm a ship and it's sailing. I'm never going to get it perfect. So in the midst of failures or challenges, what is the learning in it? And
Mhm.
I don't really view them as a failure. So I don't like the word because it implies give up and ending and over. I think it's the beginning, the lesson of life, the edge that needs to be taken off of my personality, my approach, whatever it is. Just take the lessons and glean them from that event, and apply them in my life going forward. So I grow from it and not let it define me.
Great. Um, there are books behind you. If I were to ask you to turn around and pick one out of the shelf and read, which one would you
Mhm.
pick?
Blue Ocean Strategy. I
Oh,
love the
really?
I love that book. It really is. I've swam in many red oceans before, and when you think about all of the competitive and the race to the bottom commoditization that happens in a lot of businesses, where is that blue ocean? How do I find that new ocean that I can create that is blue and there's not many sharks in it, and I get to define my market and add value and grow and not get beat up by margins because I'm trying to, make myself out to be better than the other guy. I'm just my own guy in my own space, and I love Blue Ocean Strategy. I think the work they did to create that book and that thought process, I think, is exceptional.
Awesome. Well, Randy, thank you so much for your time. It's the top of the hour, but it's been great catching up and actually getting to know you. And all the best success for your book. And I know it'll do very well. I'm sure your business will fly as well. And really looking forward to the difference you'll make in a lot of people and companies' lives. So thanks again so much. Now, don't go anywhere. I'll put you in backstage, and I'll
Super.
wrap up here.
All right, thank you, Simeon. It was a
Thanks
pleasure.
so much. All right. Well, what an awesome storyteller Randy is. One of the things that he does on his channel in starting Lyft is these sort of 5-6 minute clips where he's interviewing CEOs and asking the question about difficult struggle times and how they got through it in their own companies. And so it's really fascinating to hear the stories of, I think he's done 20 now, of CEOs and kind of what they've gone through. So I highly recommend that you check out Randy Dewey's profile on LinkedIn, connect with him, and ask him any questions that you have as well. And as he starts off this Lyft leadership, think about whether or not your organization or even yourself, could benefit from that kind of a coaching, the LIFT approach that he's talked about today. So, well, that's it for today. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. It's actually quite depressing, the weather here in Toronto, but I hope it's sunny where you guys are. All right, take care and have a good weekend. Bye bye.